loud. Okay. And we are recording the chapter on fermentation, which is chapter 15 of the Emerald Tablet, Alchemy for Personal Transformation by Dennis William Hawk. And we haven't met in about a month, so there might be some, I don't know how much you guys were on, in it the past month or not. I kind of was going in and out. I admit I wasn't as connected with this chapter. I even actually accidentally bypassed this process and went straight to distillation. So my image of my higher self is now just sitting in a in the jar of water without having been fermented, without having been burnt through the putrefaction process. So there's something there to that, but I guess it's all unfolding. And that's the fun part about this whole process is like, we're not in school, we're not getting graded. All the things that happen for a reason, and it's important to take note of it, but have no judgment and just observe the process as it unfolds for you, because everyone will have their own different experiences where you feel a little bit more connected or less connected depending on the material and what subjects we're going over. But so fermentation was the chapter that we're going over today, and before that happens, let's take a look at the sky now, because it just so happens that we're meeting during what has been dubbed as the Lion's Gate. I don't know where it came from, quite frankly, and I'm not sure how it came about, but, well, the sun's now at 16 degrees, so technically it's over. But 8/8 is the calendar marker for what's known as the Lion's Gate. But from what I believe and from what I've been researching is that the 15th degree is the Lion's Gate itself. And so that's when the sun would have been at 15 degrees in Leo. So right here. Which ended at 1 o'clock earlier today. So this Lionsgate thing, 8/8, today, it's interesting because it actually does correlate with the work that we're doing esoterically in the occult practices, because Leo is a fixed sign. It's one of the 4 fixed signs that are represented as the alchemical process for spiritual evolution. And the midpoint between each of the fixed signs represents the fixed middle point of the season that we're in. And so 15 degrees Leo represents the middle point of summer. 15 degrees of Scorpio represents the midpoint of fall. 15 degrees of Aquarius represents the midpoint of winter. 15 degrees of Taurus represents the midpoint of spring. And so from what I'm understanding is that these midpoints are portals or gates that opens up for us to access a type of healing energy or experience, most likely that is represented by the archetype of the sign that it's in. So the Leo, ego, creativity, expression, grandeur, and also your relationship to being seen or being in the public eye, being a creative person, is the Leo Lion's Gate. But also there's a lot of cosmic things that people put with it too, as in having heightened dream states or having more connection to an altered parallel existence that actually goes in line with the fermentation process as well, because the fermentation process in alchemy is the fire in the soul, and it starts the process of connecting to a higher transcendental states, or the higher transcendental planets, which is Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus. And so the higher states of alchemy, starting from fermentation, distillation, and coagulation, are these processes that go beyond the persona, or go beyond the ego, and where we are now connecting to a higher expression of self that is not ego-based. And so that kind of goes in line with this Leo Lionsgate, because Leo is ruled by the sun. It is considered to be one of the signs that is most connected to our ego state. You know, where it is in your chart, the relationship that the sun is having to the other planets represents the amount of ego, lack of ego, or the will of the ego will be represented by the sun's placement. And so currently with the, I guess this portal, I'm just going to go along with it. So the portal that we're experiencing this 8-8 Lionsgate was having a direct connection with Jupiter retrograde and Saturn retrograde, and then also a minor connection to the nodes. And it makes in a scaling triangle, which is a triangle that has no similar sides. So there are no, so there's a 30 degree, a 150, and a 120 degree angle between the sun, Venus, Jupiter, and Saturn. So to me, the way I interpret that is we've got like 3 different directions coming into one space. So the use of creativity and imagination is really important in order to tie together all of these kind of seemingly directionless energies. And the Jupiter-Saturn aspects in the Sagittarius Capricorn area or arena, actually they're in their signs too. So this is all exalted. It's an exalted triangle where Jupiter is in its sign, Saturn is in its sign that it rules, and the sun is in the sign that it rules. And we have a touch with Venus. Venus. Whoa, there was a big echo. I'm having an echo with myself.
Awesome.
It sounds okay now.
Does it? Okay.
Yeah.
That's probably because I don't have headphones on, but I don't know why it wasn't doing it before. Anyway, so this is a very strong scaling triangle that's making a connection. Right now, however, let's go to right now. The moon moved into Sagittarius and is culminating to a trine with Chiron, which will happen in the next couple of hours at 1 a.m. tonight. So one thing that's been happening for a lot of people that I've been hearing is like the dreams, like dreaming. All the dreams are very vivid currently. A lot of people are having more ethereal, like etheric kind of connections, and I can definitely atone to that because for the past couple of nights my dreams have been extremely vivid versus not having remembered any in the week prior. So apparently that's a symptom of the Lionsgate. Let's see. Our dear little Mercury went out of retrograde recently, which actually I was really enjoying the Mercury retrograde. I don't know about you guys, but I was kind of riding that wave, and I got way more inspired, and I just kind of reconnected with some old concepts and thoughts that I was kind of set down probably the last Mercury retrograde, and this one really kind of amped up my inspiration to start writing again, to connect with my literary self, I guess, my poetic self. And but now we've got some of the other outer planets going retrograde that is kind of helping, I think, to aid in the solidification of that Mercury retrograde period. I don't have a whole lot more to say about where the planets are. We have a really nice fire combustion happening with Mars in Leo, Venus in Leo, and Sun in Leo. And I don't know, Annalisa, if you want to add anything to that, because you are Leo and you have a lot of, I'd say, insight into the planetary aspects now.
I think you summed it all up pretty good. I have had a lot of Leos come into my life around the last month or so, and like more so than usual, it seems like. And I feel like a lot of us Leos are in really similar places in terms of a chapter closing this year. Like there's definitely people that are kind of like ready for that next level of expansion into a new education or job. Kind of like fulfilling the destiny seems to be a big theme for a lot of people right now, in terms of just some of the feedback that I've been getting, like fulfilling your heart's, purpose in the world seems like something a lot of Leo people are feeling extra pushed into right now. So I feel like this Lionsgate portal, maybe in the sense that it's exalted, is helping with that, especially with the Jupiter trine. Like I really feel like Jupiter is about aligning with our values, and it's the Judgment card in the tarot. Pluto and Jupiter rule the Judgment card. And I think that when Leo is being kind of judged, it's the heart and the feather on the scales. Like that's kind of how I see this Lionsgate portal for me, at least. Like I feel I'm kind of having to really think about my intentions and like what, what's really driving me. Like, is it ego or is it heart? And kind of getting clear about purity of heart themes during this time right now.
You always have such good stuff to add.
Say that again?
You always have such good stuff to add to this.
Oh, yeah. I also, when you were saying you weren't sure where the Lionsgate portal comes from, the thing that I always read, and I'm kind of like, I haven't studied it that much, but it's always like these loose little things that I'll read about in like esoteric astrology. Like Alice Bailey wrote a lot about it, and then I'll see other people posting about it. It has to do with the constellation that Sirius is a part of, that fixed star constellation.
That's what I read too, but then I looked it up, and the fixed star for the 15 degrees is not Sirius.
But it's not based off of our calendar system, so it would be different. You know what I mean? Like, because they do it for sidereal astrology.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's why it's different when we look it up. Because I was confused about that too, but they don't. Most esoteric astrology is Vedic. Like that came from all of the.
I was wondering, but then I looked up the list from a Vedic astrologer, and it was all the same. It was Sirius is at 14 degrees Cancer.
Yeah.
Well, I guess. Oh yeah.
It lines up with the pyramids.
Yeah, I think that sounds like what I read too.
Yeah, and it would be with this month because Vedic astrology, their system's different than ours, like their calendar.
It was like back in the day, Sirius lined up with the Sphinx.
Yeah. And the pyramids. Yeah.
Looking at the Sphinx. Yeah, and the pyramids. And that would have been Leo back then.
Right, exactly. And now it's not. But that's like, we have some westernized version of it. Yeah.
Yeah. But like the number 88, I don't know, is that for fun? Or is it because the sun falls on 15 degrees Leo, and then it just happened to be more like of a fun thing to say 88 portal?
That's the question I have. That's the part I'm confused about. Because in terms of like, the history of it, I know that's what it was, but then that's the part I'm confused about. I'm like, well, if Sirius is a fixed star in Cancer, then how is it lined up with Leo?
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's see, I'm pretty sure if this is sidereal, then...
Yeah, like would it move it into? We'd still be in Cancer season.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's 22 degrees Cancer, so it wouldn't even be at...
So 8-8 would be Cancer season.
No, but 8-8 would... But I'm right now for 8-8, it's at 22 degrees
Right.
Cancer. So that actually, if it was, it would, which I think it's at Sirius, I think is at 14 degrees Cancer.
So here's the thing that's interesting about this is that I actually read that Lionsgate isn't 8-8, it's July 26th through August something.
Yeah, I read that too recently, and I was like, oh.
Yeah, and they consider the portal to be like a 3-week period, but then they call 8-8 like the pivotal moment for something. And it makes sense if we were talking about the 15-degree point for us if you're not talking about Sirius. But the whole point of that degree point was because of Sirius.
Right. So actually July 31st would be when the sun is on Sirius.
Yeah. So that's the part about all this. That's why I like what you posted about the Greco-Roman calendar stuff, because in actuality, like when this stuff is getting posted, it's really contrived based on the actual origin of it.
Yeah. And that's why I don't put a lot of weight to the Gregorian calendar date, like 11/11, 8/8, 12/12, whatever, 10/10, because it's just it's a system that we've newly been using in the span of, human existence. It's pretty new, essentially. It's like less than 400 years old. So, and I read too, I found out that Greece didn't even adopt the Gregorian calendar until the 70s.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. That's crazy.
Yeah. And so they were holding on pretty hard.
That's pretty amazing. I know. Well, I'll end up Vedic astrologers after this. That's where I feel like I'm headed at some point.
Yeah, but I just don't want to be a Virgo. No offense to Virgos, but for me personally, I love my Western chart.
I love my Western chart too, I'm not gonna lie. But we're Westerners, that's why.
Yeah.
But anyways, I mean, it's cool we're recording this because anybody that watches is going to know that the whole Lionsgate portal thing is kind of a farce in terms of the origin versus current stuff. But I think that is Western astrology to begin with, if we're going to talk about what's happening mathematically actually in the sky versus the mythology that our culture has projected onto reality. And that's the illusion, right? Like that's the whole divine illusion of the human experience, in my mind, is like the stories that get told and the way that we create our reality. Like we've created this world, in that way. And it's interesting, like the way that our thought patterns can influence things, and somehow it works, for some reason. It's that group think, like third monkey thing, like
egregore.
Yeah, the egregore of our culture. Yeah.
Just wanted to say that word.
Getting into that, I was starting to feel like I had mastery over my mind in a new way. I looked in my rearview mirror and there was a woman yawning in her car, and I didn't yawn, and I didn't even remotely have to yawn. When you see somebody yawn and you have to yawn, I was like consciously aware that I saw her and had no impulse to yawn, and it was like this weird, like I'm in control of myself. Like I had this weird moment with it. It was super crazy. Anyways, I feel like that's part of like what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
I agree. I'm finding some images that I found in regards to tonight. Oh, here it is. With Juno and the Peacock's tail. Okay, that I want to have up just for like, because I realize it might get kind of redundant looking at our faces for an hour and a half or something. But so going into fermentation then, and this whole transformation experience, the fermentation process is like the least enjoyable, grossest part of the whole experience. And ironically, it's represented with a really beautiful rainbow peacock's tail. And in the end of the chapter, Dennis William Hawke says that this process is represented by Capricorn, which I find interesting because I'm kind of having different astrological connections than he is with the book, because for me, it's very Leo in terms of the fire and the soul. And
well, he says Leo and then Capricorn.
Yeah, but then I think he says it is represented by Capricorn, and
the putrefaction is the Leo part, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then after that, I had a whole meditation with that whole system that made it make sense to me more, but I still was confused afterwards.
It made sense now? How did it make sense?
So I think it's one of the Alice Bailey books. I can't remember if it's Treatise on Cosmic Fire or Esoteric Astrology. They talk about the adept wants to move from mutable to fixed to cardinal. Mm-hmm. And I read this last year and kind of it's always been in my mind, but I haven't really fully understood it all the way, I would say. But I'm just always kind of like thinking that the cardinal energy is the master, right? It's the initiative energy versus mutables kind of, that more, I always think of mutable as kind of watery. I think of Neptune in that dissolving kind of way. And then fixed is like, won't move, and then cardinal's like, you're the master, you're in control, you're activating. And I wasn't thinking about that in this chapter at all. I was still kind of confused. But when he went to the meditation that he wanted you to do, he's like, sit with your hands closed and just let the first thing pop into your head. And so I did, and I'd been house shopping online. Like I wasn't really doing anything spiritual. I was just fantasizing about houses. And so when I closed my eyes, the first thing I saw was a house. And so I was annoyed because I was like, of course I'm going to see a house. That's what I've been doing. But the house was nothing like anything I would ever want. And then I realized as I was like thinking about the house presenting itself, it was just an ugly like kind of wall. And then so it was like a dark blackish purple navy blue color, and it was just a cement wall. And then there was a triangle on top with a square box and a cross for like the window pane of the window. But when I was kind of like asking, okay, I don't really get what this is about, the cross like kind of made me look at it, and then it started moving. And I started seeing that's what I think happened. I'm trying to remember. But basically the whole thing of the fixed in Leo to cardinal in Capricorn, it was like that cross and then rotating. That's that whole swastika that like the Buddhists use. And it clicked. And I was like, oh, there's something that I'm being shown. And it's that progression of mutable fixed to cardinal. And so I had this meditation before he explains the Leo to Capricorn. That's the part that was nuts for me, was he has you close your eyes and do that. So I do that and I have that insight, but I think I'm just pulling stuff out of my butt because I don't really know why I'm being given that. And then it's after that he explains the astrology on the very next page. And I was like, oh, that is exactly what I was supposed to get from it, was the fixed to cardinal. So I think that the fixed, if we're looking at Leo, is that egoic self, and the fermentation process is that last process of, it's like that last process of holding on, I think, is what the fixed is being represented as. And that's the putrefaction, is like you have to release. And then I still am kind of confused about the Capricorn cardinal energy, but maybe that is the mastery over, you know, like I think of Capricorn as a mastering energy, right? It's like those people that are really successful because they're just gonna do it. They're just so driven to just do the thing, and at whatever cost, that there's some kind of higher mind principle within that seems like why Capricorn's associated with that. What do you guys think?
I kind of was left a little confused about him throwing Capricorn in. He says it's the alchemist assigned the astrological cipher for Capricorn to stand for the process of fermentation. The earth sign of Capricorn, whose animals are both the goat and the unicorn, represents both the most basic and the highest impulses, and the worst and the best in us. The alpha and omega sign of the zodiac appears at the beginning and end of the work. The search of the Capricorn person, therefore, is for the one thing in the work, and in many ways, Capricorn is the Ouroboros. Capricorn's apparent dichotomy also signifies the two basic processes of fermentation, the descent into the death of putrefaction and the return to life during fermentation. I can understand that more so if I'm considering Saturn as Capricorn's ruling planet, more so than Capricorn's archetype itself. Because I guess I can see it too as Capricorn ruling the zenith in the chart, which is the highest, most like greatest point one can achieve in life. And then after that, the inevitable downfall comes right after, or before or after. Either you're climbing up or you're descending. So I can see, you know, how the cusp is supposed to represent the point which we will praise the echoes. So
It's having you, Kathleen. The echo?
It's happening through my computer?
I think so, because it switches to you every time. On my end, like the yellow box is switching from Evelyn to Kathleen when it echoes.
Mute Kathleen for a minute. Yeah, actually it's better now. Maybe if yours is muted. Maybe because you have headphones and we don't. Anyway, so yeah, I can understand that seeing Capricorn's position on the astrological chart as being, you know, the highest point and the highest point one can achieve, but then also considering the opposite point of that, because of course duality exists. And so seeing the opposite would be Cancer, which represents the fourth house in the astrological chart and also represents the endings of things, where things end. So I guess I can pull it there for myself if I need to, but in general, I don't see it right now for Capricorn. But, you know, that's just probably because I don't know enough at this point. So I'll probably eventually learn more and then it'll make more sense. But so going back to fermentation and that process and how gross it is, because putrefaction is a part of that process. And he says that putrefaction is the actual dark night of the soul, and that it is the actual place where the ego is left to essentially rot or wilt away. And through that process, there is a chemical reaction that's happening in fermentation, where this oily residue substance is released from the death of something. And I guess if you have ever watched anything decay, that is a true statement. Things just decay and turn into nastiness, and then a lot of times a like liquid just kind of seeps out of it. And that is the separation of the earth element and the watery element in the object, where the earth element will, they'll both, the watery object will be evaporated up into the sky, and then the earth element will be dissolved into the earth afterwards. And that the iridescent, oily liquid that's left over is representative of the peacock's tail. The peacock's tail, which is something that I've been noticing now that we've been reading this come up a lot, is ruled by, or not ruled by, rather it's something that's sacred to Juno, the asteroid goddess. And the asteroid goddess Juno, right here, is, there's 4 main asteroid goddesses. Juno has been, she's represented, mostly connected to marriage, due to her marriage to Zeus. And she has been associated now in our modern times as the asteroid that represents in our charts the person that we're going to be with, or the place where we, I guess, partner up with someone, willingly or not, because Juno was so loyal to her marriage to Zeus out of resentment, actually, because he, as we know, was like going all over the place, spreading his seed like a Jupiterian would, and wanting to exist in multiple realities. And so he was disloyal, but Juno stayed loyal throughout the whole marriage, but she grew resentful of the women that Zeus was being adulterous with. I don't know how that's associated, but maybe you can draw some correlation. And there's this little poem that I found that is off of the Astro Style website. That's a little, I'm trying to get this stupid thing out of the way so I can read it. Okay. The Peacock's complaint. The peacock considered it wrong that he had not the nightingale's song. So to Juno he went. She replied, "Be content with thy having and hold thy fool's tongue." So essentially that means or symbolizes do not quarrel with nature. So she's represented with having a lot of peacock's tails, and the alchemical illustrations of putrefaction are all really vile and gross. It's skeletons, coffins, massacres, mutilation, worms. And I guess now that I think about it, Juno is known to kill the offspring of Zeus so that he would not be able to relish in his creation. And that was her way of getting revenge from him. But also the illustrations, where am I going? Oh yeah, so more of the illustrations represent like rotting flesh, germination, green, the color green, and rebirth. The scarab beetle is is also used to symbolize the putrefaction process. And if you've ever seen a scarab beetle, they have this green iridescent shell on them that's very beautiful and otherworldly. The esoteric meanings of scarab phonetically is dweller in the secret land of fire. The tarot card for putrefaction, of course, is the death card, and that is in line with the dark night of the soul, where things of our ego are dying away. And, you know, people who are new to tarot will see the death card and think it's a literal death, but of course now that we've gone through these, you know, now that we know what it actually means, death is a figurative thing, and rarely represents a literal death, but the symbolic death of old parts of us. One part I thought was really interesting in this whole work that he talks about in fermentation is this thing called the monk's pride, where throughout this whole process, you can be doing a really great job of evolving your soul and overcoming the ego. However, there's such subtle moments where all of the work can just be destroyed, which is something that he describes in as the monk's pride, which is any sort of narcissism whatsoever, like any sort of getting pride or feeling any sort of sense of pride from what you've accomplished or done is a detriment to the work itself, because that's the ego showing up its ugly head, rearing its ugly head to see that, you know, it's that you actually have to do it all over again. You actually have to go through the process because it was in vain for some reason. Let's see. He also says the tarot card is the Hermit, too, which is going inward. And when you get the Hermit card, it's either you're alone a lot, which could signify a depressed state, you know, singularness, not reaching out towards others, being in your own space, I guess. And putrefaction is a really depressing time. So going through the experiences of putrefaction is like feeling disconnected from other people, disconnected from source. It's moments where you feel like there's no hope, that death is all around you and there's nothing else you can really do or say to get yourself out of it. But through the work of fermentation, we're supposed to find that you have to use the willpower and the fire within to essentially survive or stay on the path. Because I think during the putrefaction stage, it's very easy to let go, lay down, rest, stay stagnant. And stagnation is the death of self. And what he says too in the fermentation chapter is that the will and imagination is the key to the entire work. And so it's not that you're, you know, when you're meditating, there's different forms of meditation. Like there's the one form of meditation where you're kind of just sitting in passivity, waiting for things to come to you, or there's other forms of meditation where you're actively trying to not think of anything, which is ironic in itself. But then there's the other form of meditation, which is active visualization meditation. And that is what we're focusing on in this work, is really learning how to harness active imagination, because it's not necessarily the key to the work in being passive and receiving information and just like letting something guide you. The key to the work is being stepping up, essentially, being present, being active, initiating yourself, initiating your fire, reclaiming your passion, and using that to ignite a creativity within you. So the last time that we met, we had this, we did the conjunction exercise of creating our overself, and then through fermentation, we kind of are getting rid of that physical representation of our higher self. But using that to activate a, I guess, egregore, which is something we've been talking about, of who we are that will last and resonate within the cosmos indefinitely, which is the end result of this whole process for coagulation when we eventually get there. We're going to be actively imagining ourselves as cosmic beings. That's something that will resonate throughout time, space, I don't know what you call it, but something that will exist indefinitely. Think of diva or, you know, archetypes, a constellation of self, something that will exist and is like a point in your existence that you can see and recognize, that, and even other people will see and recognize in multiple lifetimes. Like they'll see you and they'll recognize this one shining thing that represents you indefinitely, away from source. So that's the eventual process, and that's where we're getting to. And some of these concepts might be very elementary to you guys too, that you've already been doing. And I know that sometimes it's difficult to go back and realize what you have actually been doing is what this book is talking about this whole time. So like active imagination, I'm sure you guys have been doing that already, but this is the point of the work, is to get to a place where you're embodying active imagination like throughout your daily and waking life and into your sleeping realm too, but having those two parts to your being balanced indefinitely. So let's see what else. So there's a lot of symbols for fermentation. The two-headed Siamese twin, the color green, represents successful fermentation. There's a red lion and a white lion that you'll notice and see throughout esoteric illustrations, which is two different representations for sulfur. So sulfur has two different characteristics. The red lion is the impure sulfur, and the white lion is the purified sulfur. So the red lion is considered to be red, hot and dry. The white lion is supposed to be airy and light. Sulfur and mercury are kind of dualistic materials that play and work together in these representations also. He says that the Ouroboros is actually sulfur and mercury together, and that they are representative of the yin and the yang. The yin being mercury, it's called the mother of metals, it's the watery, passive element, and sulfur is the yang, fiery, masculine element, that work together to create will and imagination. So will is the fire, sulfur, imagination is mercury, watery, passive. But using those together is then active imagination, where you're enacting your will through your mind. And the mind is all. And so doing that on a daily basis is activating your true self. So you mentioned something called creative dialogue, where when you're meditating, you're having a dialogue with something that's not you, that is beyond you, that is something alternate to you. He says that Hermes oftentimes will be the receptor of your end of the dialogue, and that Hermes is usually where a lot of the alchemists are directing their meditations to. I guess my question is, have you guys experienced this creative dialogue within your meditations? Is it something that has occurred naturally, or something that you have done consciously when you want a direct question? Does that make sense, or is that too difficult to answer?
I think you're asking, can I rephrase the question and just see if that's what you mean?
Mm-hmm.
Are you asking if our mastery over our imaginative, like creative visual state is something that we've naturally always had, or is it something we've had to develop?
My question is, have you ever experienced having this creative dialogue
With yourself?
Yeah, in a meditative state?
Give me an example so I
So
know I'm answering the
a good
question.
example is Christians consciously have this creative dialogue with Jesus or their God, or they speak through God to Jesus through God, through Jesus to God. And so for them, they're having an active creative conversation with an entity, which is Jesus.
Oh, yeah. I have conversations with entities.
Is it something that just happened naturally for you, or is it something that you cultivated?
Well, I'd say like as a child, it was natural. And then I would say as I got older and skeptical and afraid, like that fear-based or like skepticism of like what is real and what is my mind and all of that, I kind of like shoved it away. And then I feel like after that, I had to cultivate it. Like I had to rediscover it. And I think that because I had it when I was a kid, it was something that I recognized and was like able to kind of tune into. But I definitely feel like the entities that I communicate with are very particular about what I ask and when I get to learn certain things. They were kind of mad that I shoved them off for a while and then wanted to know everything so willingly all of a sudden.
So interesting that you mentioned like feeling like you were going crazy. Is that I feel like that's a common experience for people when they engage in creative dialogue with themselves and unexpectedly get responses that, like, thinking that it is imagined, or they're going crazy, or it's like demonic. So I don't know, I just think that's interesting because there's a lot of people out there that do creative dialogue and not realize it and then just like turn it off or write it off as if they're just like hearing things, or they just don't want to go there.
Medicated for it. I self-medicated,
Mm-hmm. What about you, Kathleen? Have you like experienced, or I don't know?
Yeah, I mean, very similar to Annalisa, like younger, same kind of thing, had those active dialogues. And even when I was younger, I remember like, I was raised Catholic. So I remember even having like prayers very often. And then as I got older, being like, this is fucking stupid. And, being like turning more into a skeptic and all of that, basically very similar. And then, yeah, when I got older, like, maybe 7-8 years ago was when I decided that I wanted to start that again. And yeah, like I had to fucking work for it, and I still have to work for it sometimes too, like I'm still actively learning to be more of a participant in that for sure. But I definitely like talk to entities like almost every day to kind of build that relationship with them. Like I almost see it very much as like, just like when you make a friend in real life, you need it, they're not going to tell you all of their fucking deepest, darkest secrets in the first day of knowing them. It takes time and trust to build a relationship with humans. And it's kind of the same thing with entities and spirits, and having an active dialogue with something other than yourself. So yeah, same thing. And I definitely felt like I was crazy when I do hear something come back. I'm like, oh shit. And even today, honestly, I had a beautiful meditation, and I had a very specific journey that felt like I was seeing the future. And I was like, I very much heard someone like tell the answer of like a question I've had on the top of my mind for so long. And I immediately came out of the meditation. I was like, yeah, but is that just me, or is that, and I was like, wait, no. And then kind of sat with that, and then like had to pull myself out of it sometimes too, even though I've like done the lesson of learning that it's, you know, beyond that the imagination is sacred, and that's like part of the process to like not really question that. So long story short, yes, I have had that experience.
Because there's an interesting process that happens in the fermentation experience where you can have psychic experiences, altered states, things that jar you out of reality, basically, things that jolt you out from this third dimensional experience to kind of tell you, relay to you that there's things happening. And there's so many people that have those experiences of connecting with the other side, or, you know, seeing orbs, lights, which is what Dennis William Hawke experienced for his fermentation process, where he had a glowing orb show itself to him, and when he was younger, and he had no idea what it was, didn't really think much of it until later in life, going through these alchemical processes, realizing for himself that that was an altered state experience that he had in waking life. And so, and we may have these and have so many of them growing up, but not put a lot of weight to them, or realize that it is a very strong experience as a human to have kind of these moments of insight, moments of connectivity to the altered space. And for us, it's something that we, you know, now thrive off of, or it's something that we are understanding of and know it happens. And, you know, it's like, we're not surprised, but it's like a moment when you are kind of taken aback, like, whoa, did I just see that? Is this?
Well, it's kind of like, thank God it's like unfolded, right? Versus all at once. Because it's, when it happens, it's so jarring. And so like, thank God I have a like slow process into those altered states. Because I think since we started doing this, it's getting back to where it was when I was a kid, but it's now elevating. Like, I am now experiencing what is called the imaginal, which is the in-between space of imagination and reality. And the imaginal space is the space where you experience that pocket of transcendental experiences, where it's not your imagination, it's not reality, it's that in-between. And that is something that I feel like I've been working towards and been like, yeah, I'm ready for this, until it starts happening. And then I'm like, whoa, okay, like, I don't think I'm ready to experience this in the way that my like impatient little kid, like Page or Knight reversed tarot card, like thinks it's ready to experience or whatever. So I feel like that's like the thing about doing this work, is like trusting that too, like that natural unfoldment, and not rushing the process. Like, those things that set us backwards or make us feel like we're getting blocked, I think are probably good.
And I do believe that you have already laid out a pathway for yourself to experience these things. So, you know, before you incarnated here, so if you were in, you know, if you're realizing in the other state before you're incarnated as a floating spirit, like, okay, my unfoldment is going to go this way because I know I'm going to be born into this body which cannot handle this experience or excitement, or maybe I will need this because I'll be a fixed sign, and so therefore I will actually need a very jarring kind of in your face moment that will push me out of that of my linear focus and, one track mind site. Not that fixed sites are that way, but just explaining like, how you can get caught up in third dimension. So,
I like that, yeah.
And so I do believe that, we set this up for ourselves. And so it's all unfolding as it should, like you're saying, because we've decided it to be that way.
Yeah.
And I remember one time when I don't remember if I shared the story or not, but I was staying in Hawaii for a month on a farm, watering plants as my payment for living there. I guess so, like a work exchange program. And I was watering these cacao trees, and this is just like I had, I don't know, maybe a week in to living here, like very limited internet, like very limited electricity. And I was just watering the trees, kind of having a mental dialogue with them in my mind. Like, how's it going? How's the weather? Looks like it's raining. And then all of a sudden I heard in my head and also saw in my head like a marquee scrolling in like big bold letters, "You don't belong here, go home." And I was kind of like, I didn't get pins and needles like how you would if you saw a ghost, you would get like the hair rising. I think I just saw it and heard it and thought, why would I think that?
That's so funny and weird.
I know. Like, why would I think that? And then thinking more on it, why would I think that I thought that? And then why would I say you to me? Wait, that wasn't me. And then that was my first unfoldment of, because it was such a quiet place. I had already experienced meditation, so I was already kind of established with what my subconscious mind was, but not 100%. And so that's why initially I thought it was me I'm having this, like it came from some like the deep recesses of my mind. But then realizing, wait, but I wouldn't say you to me, I wouldn't talk in third person if it were my subconscious. I would say I. And so then that was the moment. It's like, oh, there's something here that was just like penetrated me in that moment, because it was a moment where I was really, my mind was clear. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't racing with thoughts. I wasn't thinking of I was in the moment.
Yeah.
Having a meditative conversation in my own brain with myself.
I've noticed that, like, those experiences for me have always been in the moment, like never intentional. Usually it's never like I'm going to go in here and have a transcendental experience. It always happens when I'm least expecting it, which is the thing I think that makes it feel real or valid in some dimension or way of my psyche. Because I'm just like, I'll just be really like, detached from the experience. And then it's like, what the fuck, or what the hell's going on? And I think, like it has to almost be that way to make you trust it, maybe, because it is hard to decipher between our thoughts and what we project out there and quiet the mind.
Mm-hmm.
Billboard or marquee like smacking us in the face. I think too is a good question that you asked, because one of the other things while we've been talking about it, I thought of was like, even when I was the most skeptical, like atheist / agnostic, like narcissistic, pessimistic, nihilistic person, like the worst self, I still talked to God. And like that was just ingrained at me at such a young age that it never went away. And I would notice a huge difference when it started to move away. Like when my relationship with God became less and less present in my life, the relationship I had to my life was really bad. And like when I started praying regularly again, and I've always had a very like abstract perception of God. It's never been like a fundamentalist view. It's always been like, I understand there's some energy that I'm a part of and I'm communicating with it. And every time I sync back up with that energy, it's the alignment thing. Like things start to align and things start to, and I've had that for such a long time that even when I've been in those dark spaces and skeptical, I just always am communicating with the fabric of the vibrational frequencies around me, even before I knew that that's what was going on, and it just works. So it's like, I can't not believe in that. I can't be an atheist, like truly, if I'm always talking to God. You know what I mean? Like even when I thought I was one, you know.
So you touched on like being in the super narcissistic, like nihilistic frame of mind as a human being, and I guess this isn't really, I don't know, I guess I would maybe see that as a depressed state. But
For me.
Yeah. And it's interesting that correlates with like how he described, Dennis describes that before fermentation, that is the persona of someone who is pre-fermented. Where like you are, well, there's a lot of depression. You're very passive, unreliable, and he says hopelessly depressed. So like hopelessly, there's no hope.
That's me. I mean, I was pretty much suicidal for like ages 11 to 25, I would say.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of, and so like, but you still had this active dialogue going on, but maybe coming more from like an ego place though.
Yeah, for sure. When I was younger, I mean, I had a pretty strong ego in this life. Like, yeah, there's a lot of ego I've had to cut through, for sure. I ain't ashamed to admit it. We all do.
I guess this part comes into play with the Capricorn energy of a non-fermented person. Kind of correlates with all the dark sides of Capricorn, which is like refusing to take criticism, lacking imagination, being very linear, skeptical, nihilistic, and all the parts of a like
cold and abrasive.
Yeah, and then before
my first house.
Huh?
Capricorn's my first house in Placidus.
Oh, wait, you're Capricorn. You're not Capricorn rising though?
No.
Oh, it's
intercepted. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Huh. So it was a part of your connecting to yourself, going through the death of your identity.
And Neptune and Uranus there, sandwiching Saturn.
So it's a whole transcendental experience around your identity.
Sun in the 8th house. It's like I was here to ferment.
Permanently.
Probably why I'm going through a regression on this distillation part. It's like you need to go back and ferment longer.
Yeah, I guess it was helpful that it took a month for us to meet for the fermentation part. There were some visualization techniques that he had in the book, and Annalisa, you shared yours. Kathleen, did you do that creative visualization technique?
Yeah, where you just like think and like just wait for the image to appear. Yeah, I did. I drew it too. It's not as good as the ones in my book, but it's basically I saw this kind of vessel, like a glass vase that looks like an hourglass, and I was like, okay, never imagined or seen anything like that before, and when I asked my question, which I actually don't even remember what my question was, it was like the most mundane type of question that I've totally passed through by now, I think. But I was like, I think what I asked was, because I think in the meditation it says ask a question and see like how the image like changes. And I think I asked, how am I supposed to approach my shared goals with my partner that we just had like fixed together and all of this stuff. And then the glass thing, the glass vase like broke, and all of the sand started pouring out of the bottom of it, and it kind of like zoomed into like, you know, when you microscopically zoom in onto sand and you can see all the beautiful like little things that it, you know, sharp. That's very much, it was almost like all these little stones I like zoomed in on, and I had no idea what that meant. I still kind of don't, but I
have a book you should buy in response. Keep talking. I'm going to get it.
Okay.
Very
And in the image though, before it broke and before I asked the question, I immediately knew, I was like, oh, that's supposed to represent my body. Like I just knew somehow that maybe because it was, stones of the 7 rays. Cool.
My teacher gave it to me on Sunday because she was getting rid of some stuff, and she pulled out, and I was like, oh, I'm studying the 7 rays. And she was like, that's what I thought. You should take it. And I was like, well, that's weird. I don't really have any interest in this right now, but maybe it was for you.
Cool. I definitely wrote it down. Thank you.
It's the science of the 7 facets of the soul.
Have you like checked it out yet? Have you looked into it?
No, not at all. But that's why I'm excited, because you're the esoteric tradition of stones and their relationship to the rays.
Oh,
sweet.
Cool.
Awesome.
Oh,
that's cool.
Third ray is emerald.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I can't remember like what kind of stones they were. Very like yellowy is the only thing I can remember. Kind of like the traditional color of sand, but yeah, I was like, oh, that's supposed to represent my body, but what the fuck, is my body supposed to break literally? Like, you know, I was just not in the space to like really kind of understand it at the time. And then I kind of read ahead a little bit. I think it's in Dissolution in the next chapter where they talk about, I think it's in that one where they talk about the pelican as like the next bird in the thingy. And I'm only in like the first couple pages of it. Like I just actually stopped, and I didn't want to like go too far ahead before we had our call for tonight. And the pelican is also a glass vessel that Maria Prophetessa from like earlier in the book created and as part of the distillation process, like physically. And it looks exactly like this. It's actually shaped like that. So I was like, fuck, cool. I guess I like fucking saw an actual piece of alchemy.
Let me see. That's super cool. I took a photo of the alchemy exhibit that Dennis William Hawk has, and I'm wondering if that would be funny if the same base is also in there.
Yeah, it's called whatever. I mean, this is a terrible drawing, but when I Googled it, it looked really similar to what I had seen. It's it's basically like a beaker that's like a double.
Mm-hmm. So what do you have to do then? What do you take from it? What does it mean?
What I wrote here was, I think at the time, because I did this a couple weeks ago too, by the way, I didn't do this that recently, and I have kind of just been sitting on it. But at the time I was thinking of basically how it was actually representing my resources, not necessarily like my physical body. When I first saw the vessel, I was like, oh, that's my body. And then when it broke, I was like, I know I'm not supposed to physically fucking break through this process because it's my shared goals has nothing to do with that. But I just took it more as that it's about being a little bit more resourceful, actually, so that I don't kind of repeat the same patterns of draining my resources. But that's just kind of like how it's being filtered through my most up-to-date current self. But I'm curious to see how through this process, if I ever come back to that, like what that actually might kind of shift into a little bit. But that's what came up for me.
Yeah, that double beaker thing image makes a lot of sense for this alchemical process and the distillation process that's next. So in the distillation process, we are evaporating the rest of the fluid that you use a vessel to do that in. So maybe there's a breaking point for you in terms of that process.
Oh, I like that.
And maybe just observing where that occurs for you may give insight. For me, I thought of like, I imagined really quick, really small, simple things. And before I even asked the question, the image would evolve. And then I'd ask my question, and then I thought, wait, it was kind of hard to follow because like, am I not, but I think what I took away from it was that it's that quick that it just shifts and changes before my mental monkey mind can even think of the question. And so for me, I just imagined a diamond, and then my question, as I was asking my question, it shifted into an image, like an iPhone screen. And my question was, why is it so difficult for me to have mental clarity? And it's like, all right, well, it's my phone. Bam, done. Next. Like,
that's awesome. It's so obvious and direct. Get off your phone.
Yeah. Basically. All right. So yeah, that's it. That must have been like a no-brainer for my subconscious. Like, duh. I don't even like. I've been waiting for the like. You don't even have to finish. Like, I'll just show you before you even need to know.
That's so funny. I love it.
Yeah, I don't know. It's really quick. It's so fast, but maybe that's just because it was an easy answer. So going on to distillation then, which is the next chapter. Well, let's see if there's anything that you guys want to add or anything that you feel that's important that you took away from the chapter of fermentation. Definitely would love to hear that. Now, I made so many notes and like wrote down so much stuff. Oh yeah, we didn't even talk about the ethnogenic Hermes, the process of ethnogen, which was a word that was coined in the 70s to describe the action of culminating the God within, which I love that word.
I was just reading that and I was like, maybe we should talk about this. So that's funny.
So it's a little short thing that he brings up about ethnogen and what it is. But let's see. The intermediate realm of which Dr. Jung spoke is home to Hermes, patron of the alchemists. He comes to us in unexpected ways, wearing many different guises. The term ethnogen, coined in the 70s by consciousness researchers, literally means to generate the God within. So I guess this is something that we're working towards doing. And I guess through the process of fermentation is what we strive for, kind of in order to drudge yourself out, like pull yourself out of the drudgery But then he goes into talking about psychedelics and how psychedelics help to connect us with this God within, and makes a parallel with the visuals of psychedelics that they bring, and this rainbow effect in the peacock's tail, and how they correlate, and how hallucinogens on a parallel level relate to fermentation due to this process of like going through a really physical, cognitive ego death, where you ingest the drug, you feel like something bad is happening to you, and this is like experiencing fermentation within a few hours, and which is super condensed, like a really condensed way of inducing fermentation onto yourself. And then once you've overcome the death or the putrefaction of, ingesting the herbal, whatever it is, the supplement or the chemical or whatever it is that you're ingesting that's hallucinogenic, and then yourself merges with that essence of the plant to create or unlock a parallel existence. And then you open your eyes to see like rainbows and paisley patterns and fractals and yeah. But in terms of entheogenic, what do you have to say about it, Annalisa?
I was thinking a lot while you were talking about just my psychedelic experiences that I've had when I've been on hallucinogenic drugs. And I was just thinking about it in a very personal, selfish sense. But during the fermentation process, like the fact that you brought, like that we're talking about that, I think maybe it's something I'm supposed to share since I have been thinking about it a lot over the last couple weeks. But I've only done acid 3 times, and every time that I did it, the main thing that I would see in the floor, the walls, and the ceiling was these worms that had skull heads, and they would usually be green and everywhere, and I could never not see them. And if it was extra dirty anywhere, they would multiply even more. Like it was just really, really freaky and terrible, and I hated it. And part of my negative experience with acid was that being like a primary factor. Every time I did it was like, okay, the ceiling's gonna turn into like worm skulls or whatever, and like I'm gonna be around them all the time. And I would just be sitting there like if I had to go to the bathroom, because it'd be worse like if it was a blank, like a white painted room, versus if I was in the living room with a lot of furniture and I could like be around people and look at different stuff. I could like redirect my energy. But if I was alone and just looking at the ceiling or looking at a wall, like they would just start coming like in droves, and it was just terrible. And then when I got like 10 years later, less than 10 years later, but like years later, I'm like having a Kundalini awakening. And I think it was like after my Kundalini awakening that I had this whole like epiphany about the worms skulls. Like I was like, holy fuck, like that was Kundalini trying to like speak to me through this acid experience. And one of the tattoos I got when I first became self-employed was a snake coming out of a skull head. And I didn't even remember my acid experiences when I got the tattoo. Like I had all these realizations after the fact that I had tattooed on my hand this acid experience that I had had when I was a teenager. And I just feel like the fermentation process representing those psychedelic experiences of kind of your higher self or your conversations with God, I feel like that was my higher self, but I didn't have the knowledge or the framework to work with it. I didn't know that was like the Kundalini spirit trying to make itself known to me in like an alarming way. To me, it just had that scary feeling, And I had really negative things in that way with me, because the way the drug made me feel related to negative experiences I had on other drugs. But one of the things that happened to me after those acid trips was I started experiencing this clicking sound in my occipital bone at the very where your spine connects to your brain. And I had that clicking sound in that part of my head for maybe like 4 or 5 years after doing acid those 3 times. And I had no framework for connecting all of that stuff at that time. And now it seems so like duh and obvious in the esoteric sense of what it's all connected to. So I definitely like get why alchemists and spiritual people do those drugs to connect in that way. But I feel like if you don't have that language or that filter, that framework, like, I mean, obviously it was helpful, I guess, in a subconscious way for me. Like, I'm here now, but I wish that I had been wiser when I was having those experiences then to know what to do with them. Because if anything, I just freaked out and had like terrible nightmares for like, and panic attacks for like 5 years.
Well, that's why it's like, you know, when you do, well, those hallucinogens and drugs busted out of the 60s. And we were babies. We're babies in terms of experiencing altered states of consciousness. And so we're very Aryan in our ways of understanding the altered states of mind, because as you can see now, you can go to YouTube, look at any channel, and there's like a dude with his acid experience. They're like, me and my first time on acid, me and my hallucinogen, or like, it's the very individual experience versus, you know, having like being led by a practitioner or a shaman or someone who knows what they're doing. But I guess that's kind of the charm of the United States. Is that
right? Well, I've actually been thinking a lot about that too, like our Western world in the chaos of the Western world. Like, we came here to be free and to have like spiritual freedom, religious freedom, like, you know, like prohibition tried to stop that, but hell no, that wasn't going to happen. And now like marijuana is legal, and it's just like, I know that it's not the land of the free in reality. There's a lot of things we could argue, but I feel like compared to a lot of other historical societies, we're pretty free. Like, we kind of get away with a lot of stuff, and like
we're
whatever.
Free to ingest as many hallucinogens that we want at any given moment. Like, it's regulated, but it's not like yeah, it's a felony. It's a high felony charge if you're caught. However,
how many of us have never been caught?
Right.
Most of us.
It's still like people are doing it on YouTube, and like it's something that, you know, in other cultures you would go to someone to have that experience, but we don't have that. So we don't have any of those systems in place. So yes, we're very
church and state. It's separate.
yeah. And that's what he's, you know, in the book, he talks about his experience going to South America, having an experience with a hallucinogen, and that process is very similar for a lot of people, where you take something, you have no idea what it is, and then you feel an invasive species entering your body and think, oh shit, something bad is going to happen. And then you go through that like panic for a minute. And then, but you have to learn how to focus your mind.
Yeah.
And you have to learn through that process, which is very fun for us in America, because we had no one telling us how to do this. And so you had to learn on your own how to direct your consciousness during those times. Like you said, with your experience, you figured out through the need to survive how to focus your consciousness so that you wouldn't like go through this impending doom feeling.
Yeah. And I learned how to do that when I would get high. Like, I could separate myself from the high and have the two in these different planes of existence. And I could I taught myself how to fall asleep. That's why when I drink coffee at night and everybody's like, how the hell can you do that? It's like, I feel like I have mastery over myself, even in an induced state to some degree. Like there's plenty of times that I've blacked out, and there's a lot of memories that are just gone. Like I don't remember a lot of stuff. Like if I was drinking and I was there and you have a memory of me, there's like a 85% chance that I don't remember it. Like I've just blocked out a lot of stuff that I'm not aware of, but there's something maybe in that's good. I don't know. But yeah, like I would say the benefit of playing around with drugs in terms of consciousness is that you do gain like a mastery over your mind if that's something you actively try to do, which I did. Like when I was doing that stuff, I was trying to do that, not even really knowing that I just hated not feeling in control. And maybe that's where Capricorn comes in. Maybe that's kind of why Capricorn is ruling this end of this process, because Capricorn is kind of that mastery. And I see Capricorn always as the boss, like it's the boss in charge. And I think that I love Capricorn energy in that way. Like I want to be more like that as a woman, like tapping into my authority and not having fear and being more kind of assertive in a more Capricornian way is appealing to me. And so I feel like I can kind of see why they would relate that to.
Yeah, I'm connecting it now with the Leo, because Leo is the king, right? But Capricorn is the true ruler.
Yeah.
And Leo is that energy of wanting to be seen as the king, like wanting to be known as the boss. But then Capricorn, it's feminine. Doesn't need to.
I had an insight today that I have to share in relation to that. I'm sorry I interrupted. I don't want to forget. Okay.
Capricorn is the not needing to insert its authority. It's a strong inner authority of and having strong set of boundaries that you don't feel the need to enact unless your boundaries are being tested. However, with Leo, it is like you're overexerting your boundaries because you're like overstating your sense of authority. And so I can see that balance is like being the evolution from Leo to Capricorn.
Yeah.
So, also, one thing I wanted to say too about the focus and the mind channeling is that energy of redirecting your consciousness while you're on hallucinogenic drugs is, like, I would say very similar, if not exactly the same as that type of energy that you tap into when you're lucid dreaming.
Mm-hmm.
Because those are the moments when in lucid dreaming when I've noticed how subtle the mind is, and even how sensitive to thought that your reality is when you're dreaming and in those altered states of existence. Like this, my diamond visualization, so sensitive to the thought of, the question that I was going to ask, that it just shifted so quickly, which is how sensitive our consciousness is, even on a daily basis, in the waking life. And so, like, having the ability to test that on a hallucinogen versus having to wait to go to sleep and like taking maybe 10 months to get to a lucid state while you're sleeping, I can see being very beneficial for people, just like getting straight to it, working it out in 8 hours, going back to your 9 to 5. It's very appealing. And also there's something to be said about plants merging their consciousness with us and us gaining our consciousness insights into this parallel universe with a certain plant medicine that it is trying to communicate to us, because the fifth dimension is supposed to be the plant mind, or the plant consciousness. And so I can see then, like, utilizing these herbs and flower essences and things like that as a way to connect with that subtle energy even more. What were you going to say, Annalisa? What was the thing that you thought of?
Well, it's hard because I feel like it was so much deeper than what it's going to convey as, which is why I didn't even bother telling anybody about it or thinking of sharing it, because I feel like it resonates on a deep level of my understanding Leo and my North Node more. But basically, like Leo, you know, we talk about recognition and validation, and I loved your analogy of the king who wants to be seen versus the actual ruler, you know. And I think that I had an insight today where I realized that my consciousness changed. Like, this is a dumb question. Like, I feel embarrassed even saying it, but it's like, would you rather be famous or rich? Was a question that my subconscious gave to me. Like, it just came to me. And I was like, well, rich, because fame is totally useless. That's the first time I've ever consciously been in that frame of mind. Like, I've always been like, fuck money, fuck material abundance. Like, I want to leave a mark. I want recognition. Like, I would rather die poor, but have been known than have a bunch of stuff and nobody knows who I am. And my consciousness has totally shifted. Like, I still don't feel like I need to be rich to be happy. Like, that's not what the thing was. It's not like me being like, oh, now I need to be rich. It's just that I had some kind of like thing sync up where I felt my heart impulse change from not needing that or wanting that anymore. And I also feel like that's the Leo Capricorn difference. Like, Capricorn is more focused on the pursuit of something that's material and abundant in a way that's more about the self, less about being seen. I mean, ego's the self, but it's different. Leo likes to share. So it really isn't about, for Leo, like being a Leo, it's not about yourself. It's about you connecting with others. And that's the part that gets really confusing for people. Like, Aries is about the self. Leo is about, how do I share myself, and how is that reflected back to me in a way that feels like I'm worthy of being a part of things. Like, it really wants to belong. And I think that's why it shares that 11th house polarity, you know? And so if Leo doesn't feel like it belongs, and it doesn't feel like it's liked or loved or validated, it doesn't know what its purpose is. And so, yeah, like that king analogy, it's like, I want to be recognized. I want people to feel, I want to feel like I was worth something while I was here, you know? And I think Capricorn is like, they are associating it with the great work, which is, you know, more spiritual. And my teacher on Sunday, I haven't read this yet, so I can't, maybe you guys know, I have no idea. I have no grounds to speak on it, because now I have to go down this rabbit hole. But in esoteric astrology, Capricorn is a feminine. I know we know that because of the yin, but you know how Capricorn's associated with Saturn. They saw the moon as Capricorn's feminine ruler or something like that, instead of it being the fall.
Mm-hmm.
And so she was telling me something like that. I think it's in one of the Alice Bailey books or in that vein. But I think that adds a whole nother layer to this conversation with the sulfur and Mercury that could be a fun rabbit hole to go down.
Makes sense. That would probably open up, digging deeper into esoteric astrology would probably open up a lot more awareness and understanding of this book and some of the connections.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's something we forget, that Capricorn is feminine.
Yeah.
And the feminine aspect to Capricorn, we've kind of stripped away. We've stripped away so much of what that means to be a strong Capricorn feminine archetype. And it's been handed over to the masculine so much so that we forgot that we rightfully, feminine and energies rightfully have or rule over like justice and politics even, and systems And which, you know, it's so in line with even the Gregorian calendar switch over to the sun cycles versus the moon cycles, which a lot of cultures were based off of. Like my mom, for instance, in Korea, they were based on the moon phases, and it was a feminine, that I would call that like more of a feminine culture, even if they may like have more patriarchal views. But yeah, my mom didn't even know what her birth date was because it was on the moon phase, and so it was like totally different from the Gregorian calendar phase. Gregorian calendar, because the Gregorian calendar doesn't even recognize the moon at all, and the moon cycle in any way. It's all based on the sun cycle, or through the Earth's relationship to the sun, not with any regard to the moon at all. Like incorporating the moon with the sun and their cycles and us being a part of it versus like us being the ruler of the sun or something is, I think, more in line with the natural universal order. Maybe one day we'll get to it, but yeah, when I first learned that Capricorn was feminine, like my mind was like,
yeah, I always think of it as like crone energy.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Queen of Discs is the Capricorn card. It's the grandmother. The grandmother, I guess, if you want to think of it in terms of the family dynamic, would be the one that really has all the power in the family, but she's the quiet ruler of the family. She lets everything play out within the family dichotomy before she interjects herself into into saying anything, really. It's like she sits, she's quiet, she listens, she observes, and then if she sees something out of line, then she'll say something. Then she'll enact her rule or feel the need to, but it's like she doesn't necessarily want to. Because it's not like she doesn't want there to be chaos for her to exist as a rule bearer, you know?
Right.
She would rather everything be in order already so she doesn't have to enact herself as a rule bearer. So it's like the weight of responsibility of being an elder is Capricorn.
I feel like that's why they talk about the 10th house being associated with the mother still.
Yeah. There's still like
I think it depends on the individual. I usually will just kind of look at the aspects and see it more. I always incorporate series. I always look at series for the mom. It's always way more accurate than anything else.
Okay, so it's almost 9:00, and I'm pretty sure we've covered majority of fermentation. At least I hope so. If not, you can read the book. And so the next chapter is chapter 16, Distillation, Consecration of the Stone, which I think, Kathleen, your visualization will make more sense when we get into this chapter, because it is specifically kind of what your visualization is about. The distillation, which is like the evaporation process. And it would be great if we get an herbalist on for our next meeting, because I feel like they would shed a little bit more light and depth into this process. But
Kathleen's an herbalist. You're an herbalist, Kathleen.
Yeah, I've only distilled once or twice in my life, but maybe I could share a little bit about it's been years. It was actually the
essences and stuff.
Yeah, they're not, you don't quite distill anything in that process though, but
you know what the process entails.
Yeah.
So you can share it with us.
Yeah. I'll have to, honestly, believe it or not, it's the very ever first herbal thing I've ever done ever, and that was like 5 years ago. So I need to brush up on it too. Like I just have to look at the recipe on how to do it, and I'll probably remember. But I made lavender water, and that's really easy to do. Actually, I could probably send everybody that recipe if everybody can. You can do it with dried lavender or something, and just use it as a facial toner.
Yeah, please.
Awesome. I would love that.
Yeah, ideally we would have done something with our work that would allow a product at the end, maybe with this distillation process, but
Yeah, I'm not sure how we would do that.
Yeah, it's not really what it's about either.
Water that I'm gonna burn through. And
I mean, we could do it with the water, actually, but
not mine.
Mine's a little creamy, so I don't know how it'd work out.
No, it's all right. Maybe this is like the first run through for this book, so we're kind of all just figuring it out. However, for distillation, we are going to be boiling whatever remains into nothing, into vapor. And so he has a process in here for visualization meditation. I definitely want us all to do that and partake in it. But also what I want is to have this part be a process where we sit down for like at least 30 minutes to 45 minutes, even an hour if it takes that long, or if you go that far, of focused visualization, active imagination while you are boiling this water with your old self. So kind of like at first what you can do when it starts boiling and the air vapors start to rise, you can gaze. You can do gazing into the vapors at first if you want. And what the whole point of this is, the whole process will be to move light through your body, moving light through your ethereal body with your imagination. That's it. I'm just going to leave it at that because I want you to play with it, and I want you to read the chapter first and then come up with a process that works for you to do that. But I definitely want it to be like an extended period where we're actively doing this imagination visualization for like at least 30 minutes. And that sounds like a lot, but once you get into it, like 45 minutes can go by and you won't even realize it. And then just record the experience, record the process, record what happened. We don't have to, we don't have to share detail by detail what we did or anything like that, but mostly I want to share our experiences with doing that active visualization. What came up, things that manifested, things that worked, things that didn't work. And that's it. And really it's like just an exercise of growing your strength in visualization. So it's not like you have to have an outcome. Like you don't need to have a set goal. It's fine if it goes off track. It's just an experiment. We're using ourselves for this experiment. So, and as good scientists, we don't expect an outcome because that will persuade the end result, and we don't want that. We want to just purely observe. So yeah, that's that. And also I guess I wanted to recap what's happening in terms of Esoteric Book Club and when we're meeting, because we missed last meeting, the date for last meeting. So I added it all up. We would have 6 more meetings left for the rest of the book. And because even after this whole process, we still have, even though distillation is the last process, we still have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 more chapters to go. Oh no, we have coagulation and then 8 more chapters. So we're almost through. We started this in February. So congratulations to you guys and to me for still being here and sticking through this. We're so close. I'm already thinking about the next book, but We only have 6 more weeks. And then after the distillation and coagulation process, if you guys want or think that we can just bang it out in less than 6 weeks, we'll talk about that after coagulation. But yeah, so that's the time frame for the rest of the book club. So it'd be distillation, coagulation, and then 2 chapters each. Yeah. So that would leave us to, actually, if we went on that schedule, it would leave us at October 31st for being the last meeting for this book. And I know that you guys probably have plans for Halloween, so I'm not sure what you guys want to do with that. But so maybe we could like merge it into 5 weeks instead. I think that would be a nice rounding off point. So yeah, other than that, we'll meet in 2 weeks. I'll upload this video, and Kathleen, if you can send over that distillation process as a side bonus thing that you can experiment with, I'll add that in the email and with the YouTube video. And then also for all those people who are watching, Kathleen made a really beautiful PDF, Celestial Oracle PDF that's she has available through Daughter of Wands. Is it daughterofwands.com? It's only $8.88 for this 8/8 portal. That's channeled by her with beautiful illustrations and correlates beautifully with the book that we're reading and also the processes that we're going through. So that's all I've got for tonight. You guys are great. I love you.
Thank you for that amazing.
I love you guys.
Yeah, I love you guys. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'll see you guys in 2 weeks, and I'll talk to you later.
Yay, thanks, Ellen. Kathleen.
Bye.